Who is the greatest Smash Ultimate player of all time? I'm LG SchuStats, and being the stats nerd I am, I wanted to find an objective answer to the GOAT question. So I made a statistical ranking that factors in every single tournament performance of every single player, and today we're going to use it to answer the GOAT question once and for all. I wanted to create a system that takes as centrist a view as possible in measuring someone's legacy. So there are two different ways players can gain points, which highlight different things that different people value when it comes to measuring a player's all-time legacy. One of them rewards players who have demonstrated consistently great skill during different eras of the game, and the other rewards high peaks and amazing individual performances. That's all you need to know for this video, but if you want to know the details of exactly how this ranking works, I have a methodology document in the description. If you'd like to see a much longer list, it's on my website SchuStats.com, but today we're just focusing on the biggest legacies in the whole world and each of the 5 super regions of Smash, which are Japan, Latin America, the United States, Canada, and Europe. And while Smash of course exists outside these places, the top 100 greatest players of all time are all from one of these regions. Let's start with Canada, whose 3 main GOATs are Big D, Ouch, and Riddles. Big D has an incredibly large stature, but he plays 2 tiny ice climbers who are extremely technical and considered mid-tier by most people. But just like his head, he brought them to heights not thought to be possible. He's beaten some of the world's best at many big tournaments, including a 3rd place at SoCal's Super Major main stage, which qualified him for the most prestigious invitational, Smash Ultimate Summit, where he beat the most dominant and consistent player at that time, Akala, while using ice climbers against Steve. Also, side note, out of his 5 best wins of all time, 3 of them are on light, and I think that's really funny. His achievements earned him the 47th best player of all time and the 3rd best Canadian player of all time. Ouch is from the same home province as Big D, British Columbia, or BC for short, and his first global ranking, albeit unofficial, was on Orion Rank, and it looked like this. That's because he didn't travel much at all, but then there was a major tournament in his town, Battle of BC 4. And he showed why he is one of the greatest Canadian players of all time, because he didn't just make top 8, he got 3rd, with wins on Shootone and Riddles, the greatest Canadian player of all time. Speaking of which, in October 2022, Riddles became the first Canadian on this list to win a major tournament, as well as the first Kazuya main to do it. In the process, he beat Light twice, Onin at his peak, and Tweak. But then, the very next year, he won another major, except this one was a super major, with his biggest wins there being Sonic's and MKLeo when he was reigning ranked number 1. He's also beaten 8 of the top 10 players on this list, almost all of them multiple times, and all those achievements make him the greatest Canadian player of all time and the 19th best player of all time in the world. Over in Europe, there have been quite a few players with a very strong legacy, namely Siski, Bloom for Eva, and Reflo. These are the only Europeans to make top 50 all time, and although there are quite a few Europeans in the top 100, no others really come close to top 50. Except I failed to mention Gluttony, because he is in a completely different league of his own. Although Siski, Bloom, and Reflo have some stellar achievements, none of them can really hold a candle to the undeniable GOAT of Europe. No other European has had the longevity or the peaks that Gluttony has. His most monumental achievements were placing first at 2 different super majors, as well as his ability to contend with and beat the very best players in different eras throughout the entire game's lifespan. Oh, and he did it with solo Wario, who is only considered good because of what Gluttony has done with him, which earned him the title of 8th best player of all time. In Latin America, there are 4 horsemen. While there are many great players throughout Latin America, especially Chile and Guatemala, I really mean Mexico and the Dominican Republic, because those are the home countries of all 4 of the players with undeniably the greatest legacies in Latin America. Meister has been a fairly consistent top threat ever since he debuted on the official global rankings at number 6 in the world, a feat that was unheard of in any Smash game at the time, and has only been topped by Spargo and Akala. We'll get to those 2 later. Meister's legacy is painted by many fantastic performances throughout the game's history. He seems to be able to come out at any time and prove the haters wrong when people sleep on him, which earned him the number 16 best player of all time. Although Sonic started to pop off in results much later than Meister, he outshines him in his peak performance. I'm saying he's one of the four horsemen of Latin America, but during 2023 and 2024, he was dubbed by the community to be one of the four horsemen of the world. He's famous for his insane consistency, with one of the greatest losers runs of all time at CEO 2022 and Supernova, as well as getting second at almost every major he entered in 2024. However, by far his greatest single tournament run came at the end of 2023 when he won Port Priority 8, a premier, which is the highest tier of tournament, where he had to beat the two greatest players in the world that year, Mia and Akala. All this together put him at number 9 all time. Only 3 players have ever been ranked number 1 globally, and 2 of them are MKLeo and Spargo, both from Mexico, so we'll get back to them later. But first, let's talk about the United States, where there are also 4 horsemen. First, DeBuzz, who is a longtime veteran of Smash. In Smash 4, he was the 4th best player of all time. In Smash Ultimate, he has also been an extremely prominent threat during the entirety of the game's lifespan. Although he's never won a major, he's made many impressive runs during every era of the game, including the very first Super Major, Genesis 6, where he placed 4th, which was also the 6th highest entrant bracket ever. At the 3rd highest entrant tournament, he placed 2nd, beating some of the best players in the world, including double eliminating the 2nd best player in the world that year, Mia. He is the best player of all time to have not won a major, at number 11. Mars, on the other hand, was extremely dominant during the first year and a half of the game, when he was ranked top 3 in the world, winning multiple super majors, including the 10th highest entrant tournament ever. But then, he decided to become a content creator, and therefore was bad, except for when he felt like top 8ing a major every once in a while just for fun. If you don't believe me when I say this guy plays for content in bracket, let me show you this.
Non, il va pas le refaire. Il a plus d'air dodge. Il est fou!
But for his extremely dominant early peaks, he's the 12th best player of all time. Tweak and Light are undeniably the greatest American players of all time because they are the only 2 players in the world to have been ranked in the top 10 every single global ranking. Besides that, one of Light's biggest achievements is his first place at Litvitational 2, where he beat Mia twice, Shattuck, and Zomba all during their primes. Actually, he's won all 3 Litvitationals, and many other majors. Another feat I'm particularly impressed with is his even 4-4 record versus Prime Mia in what is considered to be a horrendous matchup, Fox versus Game & Watch. Some of his other great records are 10-5 versus Sonics, 14-11 versus Tweak, 14-7 versus DeBuzz, and 8-8 versus MKLeo. But Tweak absolutely blows him out of the water. While they've been going back and forth the past few years for number 1 in the US, he has some accolades that simply put him in another tier. For one, he's the only American player to crack top 2 in the world. He's also the only player to have won a major tournament in every single calendar year, including 2018. Except for 2025, but he still has a chance to change that. He's the only player on this list who could come close to MKLeo's absolute dominance in 2019. Tweak was ranked 2nd and 3rd in the world during the 2 seasons that year, and was the only player on this list to beat MKLeo twice in the same super major in his peak year of 2019, which he did at Frostbite. In fact, no one besides Tweak double eliminated him from a super major until April 2022, when Gluttony did it at Pound. His stellar 2019 and his ability to win in literally every era of the game, even the short 2018, 2020, and 2021 years, makes him the greatest American Smash player of all time, the greatest player to never hold the number 1 rank, and the 4th greatest player of all time overall. Finally, let's look at Japan, which is definitively the best Smash region. There are so many great players I could talk about, but I want to focus on the players who made the top 10 all-time rankings, of which Japan has 4. That's right, 4. No other country has more than 2 in the top 10, and Japan has 4. Zachary, at number 10 all-time, really made a name for himself in 2019 with his first place at the Big House 9. one of the largest tournaments of the season, and it was well earned, because he had to get 6 wins on the global top 10 for that season to win the tournament, which landed him global rank number 7 for that season. Then he decided to win a super major with only Sora literally right after he was released. And then he became a top Pokemon Unite player, and then he came back to Smash and switched to Solo Pit, an obscure mid-tier that no one played, and now he is the face of Pit, and no one can even come close to replicating his results with Pit. Next is Shuton, who has by far had the greatest longevity as a top of the top Smash player in Japan. Let me put into perspective how impressive his longevity is, even with all the shifts in the meta, especially in Japan. He won the very first Japanese major, Umabura SP, and was by far the best player in Japan in the first season of 2019. And in the most recent season, he was ranked number 7 in the world. And he was winning Smash 4 regionals all the way back in 2015. That's right, 10 years ago. Which doesn't count for this list since it's just Smash Ultimate, but it's still wildly impressive. Alright, Mia and Akala. These two have been dominating Japan for the last 2 years, and Akala has been dominating the last 3 years. Even though Mia has only been at the top of the top for about 2 years, he already has the record for the most major wins at 27, 2 more than MKLeo's 25 major wins. This dude is nothing short of a grinder. His sheer dominance over everyone in Japan, except for Akala, has brought people's perception of Mr. Game & Watch from a decent top tier to top 3 in the entire game. His biggest tournament wins were at 3 premier tournaments, Kaguribi 11, Kaguribi 12, and Kowloon 12. He beat his greatest rival and previous bracket demon, Akala, 5 times in 3 tournaments, proving his worthiness of the number 5 spot in the all-time rankings. Alright, it's time to talk about the big 3, Akala, MKLeo, and Spargo. The only 3 players to achieve global rank 1 and thus probably the only players in contention for the title of GOAT. Let's start with Spargo, the most recent player to reach global rank number 1. This past season was actually the first time Spargo has ever been officially ranked over Akala. But what's crazy is that for pretty much their entire rivalry, Spargo has had a chokehold on the matchup, with a dominant 7-2 set count. For 2 years, Akala seemed unstoppable, except against Spargo. And against him, Akala seemed absolutely hopeless. At one point, it seemed like he gave up, going Donkey Kong instead of his usual top tier picks of Steve, Kazuya, or Pyra and Mithra. On top of that, Spargo is one of only 2 players to win 3 super majors in a row, the other player being MKLeo. Spargo's streak came from winning Supernova, Riptide 2024, and LMBM 2025 in a row. However, only 2 players have had more consistent, lengthy, and dominant peaks, and those 2 players are Akala and MKLeo. Both of these players had multiple years as the undisputed number 1 player in the world, with unmatched results by anyone else at the times of their respective peaks. During 2023 and 2024, Akala was part of the 4 Horsemen, which consisted of him, Spargo, Mia, and Sonics. For a year and a half, he was by far the strongest and most consistent of the 4, and rarely ever lost to anyone outside the 4 Horsemen. He's won 20 majors in his life, and of those, he won 13 without losing a single set. He was so good from the very beginning of his career in early 2022 that he won the first major he ever entered, and then the second, and then the third one, and that third one was a super major. While he never quite hit the elusive triple super major, he has continued to win major after major after major. He has an over 70% tournament win rate. Not set win rate, tournament win rate. Meaning out of the 82 tournaments he's entered, he's the last man standing 70% of the time. And he's only ever missed top 8 once. No one else has come close to that. With all these accolades, he has 40 million points on the all-time ranking. For reference, Spargo is really close behind with roughly 38 million points, and Tweak has 32.6 million points. Unfortunately, Akala was born too late for GOAT status, Because MK Leo has 57 million points. The gap between him and Akala is larger than the gap between Akala and Sonics at number 9. And the gap between MK Leo and Sonics is bigger than the gap between Sonics and me. And I'm number 6,685. This man was simply too dominant over almost every single player for too long. He did not miss a grand finals for 1,000 days in a row, from May 2019 to March 2022. He has won by far the most super major tournaments out of anyone, with 16 super majors. Oh, and remember how I said the only other player to get the triple super major was MK Leo? Well, he actually did it twice, and it was actually a streak of 4 super majors, followed the next year by a streak of 5 super majors. He was also the most clutch player alive in his prime. Let me tell you a story. EVO 2019 was the largest tournament of all time, being the only one to surpass 3,000 entrants. After winning his first 8 matches there, he lost in winners quarterfinals. And if he wanted to win the whole tournament, he'd have to win 8 more matches in a row against the best players in the world. And that is exactly what he did, because MK Leo is just the GOAT.